Okay, so good day everyone, good day students. For today we're going to talk about identifying the different random techniques. Okay, so after going through this module, you are expected to number 1, determine the population and the sample. Number 2, illustrate random sampling. Number 3, assess what sampling techniques to be used in the different situations. Number 4, write a simple research methodology using any of the sampling techniques. Okay, so let's start. Ayan, so we're going to start with the activity number 1 entitled Anong Connect. So what you're going to do class here is from the given illustrations, explain the relationship or the difference of population and sample. Okay? Can you give me the relation, or can you illustrate population and sample based only on our illustrations? Okay. So when we said population class, it includes all of its elements from a set of data. The size of the population is the number of observations in the population. Okay, so for example, if ABS-CBN network has 11,000 employees having the required blood type in a certain study, then we can say we have a population size of 11,000 employees. Okay. While sample class is consists of one or more data drawn from a population. It is also a subset or an incomplete set taken from a population of objects or observations. In research class, collecting data can either be done in the entire population or the subset of this population called the sample. So if the researcher opts to use sample rather than a population, he must take considerations on the number of samples and how these samples can be chosen out of his target population. The question class here is that, ayan, why do you think we need to get a sample? Why not a population? If your answer is all about money and time, then you're correct. Taking samples instead of population saves time and cost effective. What about the process, or what process do we need to take so that our sampling process will give equal chance for every individual in the population to be included? Okay, so if your answer is random sampling, then you're correct. Because random sampling is a sampling method of choosing representatives from the population, wherein every sample has equal chance of being selected. Accurate data can be collected using a random sampling techniques. Okay, so take note of the word equal class. Again, when we said random sampling, it's a method, or it's a sampling method wherein there's an equal chance of being selected. Okay? So yung sample natin, kino-collect siya ng fair. No? Ibig sabihin, lahat ng nasa population, meron silang opportunity, lahat sila may chance na maging lahat sila may chance to be selected for our studies. Although class, we must be careful in using the sampling because it has advantages and also disadvantages. It can also be a source of bias and inaccuracy. Ayan, so to understand more about the population sample and random sampling, let's do the activity number 2, the scenarios. All you have to do is to analyze the following scenarios, then answer the questions that follow. Okay, so the first question is, the first scenario is, as of May 6, 2020, the Department of Health recorded 131,786 unique individuals who got tested for the COVID-19 out of approximately 109,369,019 Filipinos. The first question is, identify the population. If your answer is all Filipinos, then your answer is correct. What about how many elements are there in the population? Okay, so the correct answer is 109,369,019 Filipinos. Next question is, who are the samples? Very good. The answer is tested individuals. What about how many are selected? Very good. The answer is 131,786. The last question is, do you think the situation illustrates random sampling? Why or why not? Okay, the correct answer is no. Not all Filipinos have equal chances of being selected in that particular scenario. Why? Only unique individuals who got tested for the COVID-19. Meaning to say, hindi lahat nagkaroon ng opportunity to be tested for the COVID-19 test, no? Kasi ang tinest lang nila is yung mga unique individuals. We can say that that unique individuals are those mayayaman, or we can say those unique individuals ay yung may ubo lang. So pag wala kang ubo, hindi ka nila iti-test. Okay? Next, let's have another scenarios. Barangay West Rembo has 1,362 family beneficiaries of the government's Social Amelioration Program or SAP. The barangay captain decides to survey how these recipients spend their money during community quarantine. He writes each of the names of the beneficiaries in small pieces of paper, then he rolls and put them in a box, then draws 100 names to answer the survey questionnaire. The first question is, identify the population. Okay, the correct answer is the beneficiaries of SAP in Barangay West Rembo. Next question is, how many elements are there in the population? Okay, the correct answer is 1,362 family beneficiaries. Next question is, who are the samples? Very good answer. The selected beneficiaries of SAP. How many are selected? 100 families. The last question is, did the barangay captain use random sampling in this situation? Why? Okay. Yeah, correct answer is yes. There is randomization wherein each beneficiary has an equal opportunity to be selected on the survey to answer the survey. Okay, there you go. At this point, class, we have already knew that a random sampling is a process or a technique used by statisticians, researchers, and lay people in choosing a sample from a population wherein all the members of the population have equal opportunity for being chosen as a sample for the study. This time, class, let's do the next activity. This activity class will help us to understand the different ways to randomly select our sample by looking at the following situations. So our first situation is, a researcher writes the name of each student on a piece of paper, mixes the papers in a bowl, and draws 7 pieces of paper. Do you think this situation illustrates a random sampling? If your answer is yes, then you are correct. The first situation, class, illustrates simple random sampling. The pieces of paper corresponds to each student as elements of the population. All of them have equal chance of being selected as a sample by randomly picking 7 pieces of paper in a bowl. Okay. Ayan. So the first type of random sampling, class, is a simple random sampling technique. It is the most basic random sampling wherein each element in the population has equal probability of being selected. They are usually represented by unique identification number that is written on equal size and shape papers, and then selection of samples is possible through the lottery method. Random numbers selected to decide which elements are included as the sample. The drawing number of paper is based on the desired number of samples. Okay? So let's go back to the same problem earlier. What if naman class, the researcher selects every 7 student from a random list? Okay, so where the researcher tells the class to count and then selects those students who count a multiple of 7 numbers. Do you think this situation illustrates random sampling? If your answer is yes, then you are correct. The given situation class illustrates a systematic random sampling. From the word itself, systematic, meaning there's a system, there's a rule to be followed. Creating every 7 student on a random list creates create an equal chance for all the students. Selecting every 7 student on the random list of names creates an equal chance for all the students. The same thing happened in selecting students who count multiple 7 or 7, 14, 21, and so on. So the second type of random sampling is systematic random sampling. It's a sampling which uses a list of all the elements in the population, and then elements are being selected based on the kth consistent intervals. So class, to get the kth interval, all you have to do is to divide the population size by the sample size. For example, class, your population is 150 and your desired population is 50. And desired sample is 50. So to get the interval, all you have to do is to divide 150 by 50 and the answer will be 3. So in that case, class, you have to get a fixed point wherein that will be the first person to be included in your study. So in this illustration, we our fixed point is 2. So 2 will be the first sample that we have. And then after 2, we have 3, 4, 5. Then 5 will be part of our sample. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and so on and so forth. Now, going back to the situations class, what if class, the researchers separate the list of boys and girls, then draw 7 names by gender? Do you think this situation illustrates a random sampling? Okay, so let's see. For example, in this illustration, okay, so lahat ng mga boys at girls magkakasama. Then what we're going to do is to rearrange them wherein boys will be together and girls will be together. Okay, so the question class, do you think the situation illustrates random sampling? Wherein in this particular case, after arranging them by gender, you're going to pick 7 names for the boys and 7 names for the girls. Does this situation illustrate a random sampling? Okay, so if your answer is yes, you are correct. This situation illustrates stratified random sampling because the students were divided into 2 different strata or groups, boys and girls with a proportional number of for each group. Samples will then be selected at random from these 2 groups. For this instance, okay, so I'm going to select 4 boys and then 4 girls. So these boys will be part of the sample and these girls will be part of the sample. But the question class here is, how are you going to choose those samples? Yung 4 na lalaki at 4 na babae, how are you going to choose that? Okay, so to be fair class, you have to perform the SRS. What is SRS? Simple random sampling or the systematic random sampling. You can separate the names of the boys and separate the names of the girls, then pick 4 boys and 4 girls. Or you can do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Then that is also the same thing for the girls, and so on and so forth. So that is what we're going to do. So the third type of random sampling class is what we call stratified random sampling. Stratified random sampling involves the division of population into smaller subgroup known as strata. The division might depend on the different factors like age, gender, grade, barangay, and etc. Okay, so class, what if the researcher surveys all students from 3 randomly selected classes out of 7 classes? Do you think this situation illustrates a random sampling? If your answer is yes, then you are correct. These situations illustrate cluster sampling or cluster random sampling. Since all students are divided into clusters or classes, then 3 classes were selected at random out of the 7 classes. All of the students of these 3 classes comprise the samples of the study. Take note that each cluster is mutually homogeneous yet internally heterogeneous. So for these examples, let's divide the population into 7 classes. Okay? And then, from that 7 classes class, all of them are homogeneous. When we said homogeneous, pare-parehas lang yan. No, walang, not, for example, these classes is not, it doesn't mean na sila yung mahuhusay, no? It doesn't mean na itong class na to ay may hina. No, there's no such thing as like that because all of the classes, all of the cluster are homogeneous. But internally, they are heterogeneous. Ibig sabihin, yung mga bumubuo sa bawat cluster na yun ay iba-ibang tao. For example, this is Barangay West Rembo and this is Barangay Sembo. Okay, Barangay West Rembo is not different from Barangay Sembo. They are all barangays are the same. But the people inside or the people living in each barangay is a different person. No, magkakaiba po sila. So in that case, we're going to choose 3 classes out of 7 classes. Of course, in choosing 3 classes, you have to perform as well the SRS, either simple random sampling or the systematic random sampling. Okay, so the fourth type of the fourth type of random sampling is what we call the cluster random sampling. It is often used for a large populations or large geographic area. It is obtained by dividing the population into subgroups called cluster. So, what is the difference of cluster or stratified random sampling and cluster random sampling? When we said stratified random sampling, members of the subgroups have similar characteristics. Kaya nga 'di ba kanina, dinivide natin yung ating population in their by gender. We can also divide them by their age, according to their age. Okay? But the members of the subgroups have different characteristics. Okay? Stratified random sampling is used in a smaller population while cluster random sampling is used in a larger population. So class, the sampling technique that involves random selection are what we call probability sampling. So the things that we discussed earlier, the simple, systematic, stratified, and cluster random sampling are all types of probability samplings. But there are also sampling techniques that do not involve random selection of data, and they are called non-probability sampling. An example of this is convenience sampling, wherein the researcher gathers data from the nearby sources of information, exerting minimal effort. From the word itself, convenience, which means convenient and readily available. So, meaning to say, kung sino lang po yung available, sino lang yung malapit, sila lang po ang magiging part ng sample. Okay? For example, how much do you weigh? So, kung sino lang po yung malapit doon sa researcher, sila lang po yung magiging part ng sample. Kaya nga sila tinawag na convenience. And ito po yung mga sampling na tinatawag nating bias. No? Because they cannot obtain the accurate data since the sample is not taken, it does not taken randomly. No, kinukuha sila as I said, kung sino lang yung malapit and sino lang yung pwede. Okay? So, ayan. So, there you go. Sila lang po yung ating magiging sample. So, since etong part na to ay malayo na kay researcher, hindi na sila pwedeng o hindi na sila magiging part ng kanilang o ng kanyang sample. Kasi nga, again, malayo sila and maybe they are not ready. Okay? They are not ready kasi may mga ginagawa sila, may trabaho sila or something like that. Okay, so it is being used by persons giving questionnaires on the streets to ask the passers-by. No, ito nakikita natin to sa mga survey. Yung makikita ninyo sa mga Facebook posts na kung saan may mga nakamotor, then they're going to ask the person o yung mga passers-by, yung mga tao mga tambay, no? Tatanungin nila sinong gusto nilang presidente, no? And then they're going to conclude, itong barangay na to, ang presidente nila ay si ganito, si ganyan. No? But that's not accurate. Okay? Bias 'yun kasi 'di ba tinanong mo lang kung sino lang yung nandoon sa area na 'yon. Okay? Okay, so another one is another one is purposive sampling. So when we said purposive, it is only based on the goal of the studies of the researchers. So for example, what can you say about the lessons in the curriculum of CCS? Okay, would it be okay to if we're going to ask this to our sports track students? Of course, no. Kasi wala naman silang ka-idea kung ano ba ang curriculum ng CCS. Kasi hindi nila ito pinag-aaralan. Kaya siya tinawag na purposive. So, kung sino lang po yung part or kung sino lang yung may kinalaman doon sa study mo, sila lang po yung pwedeng maging sample ninyo. Okay? Okay, so let's do the activity number 4, independent practice. Assess what sampling techniques to be used in a different situations below by writing SRS for simple random sampling, SYRS for systematic random sampling, STRS for stratified random sampling, and CRS for cluster random sampling. Okay, so for question number 1, you are given a list of all graduating students in your school, and you decide to survey every 10 student on the list. Ask them the organization that they belong. What is your answer? Okay, very good. The correct answer is stratified random sampling. Question number 2. You wish to make a comparison of the gender differences in the mathematics performance. You divide the population into 2 groups, male and female, and then randomly pick respondents from each of the group. What is this? Okay, very good answer. The correct answer is stratified random sampling. By the way, I just want to correct myself. In number 1, it's systematic random sampling. Parang nabanggit ko ata is STRS, no? So, it's systematic random sampling kasi there's a system to be followed. Yun nga, yung 10th student. Okay? So, let's have number 3. You randomly pick 5 out of 15 barangays to conduct your survey in your municipality or city about their best environment-friendly practices. What is this? Okay, the correct answer is cluster random sampling. 4. You write the names of each student in a piece of paper, shuffles, and then draw 8 names to answer the survey on the ethical media practices. What is this? Correct. The correct answer is simple random sampling. Number 5. You wish to determine the effects of implementing the COVID-19 community quarantine in the Philippines. Among the variables, that socioeconomic status of your respondents is your primary concern. What sampling technique would best select your sample for this study? Correct. The answer is stratified random sampling. Okay, so let's do the summary. So again, the four types of random sampling is simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, stratified random sampling, and cluster random sampling. And the two types of non-probability sampling is convenience sampling and purposive sampling. Simple random sampling meaning it's the most basic part of random sampling. The systematic random sampling, it has a what? There's a system or rule to be followed. Stratified, it's a population that divided into two different strata and it is used by smaller population while cluster random sampling is used by larger population, no? Convenience sampling is gathering data from nearby sources of information exerting a minimal effort. Sino lang available, sino lang yung convenient, and sino lang yung available. Purposive is respondents are being selected based on the goal of the studies or the researchers. Okay, so points to remember to ponder. You must be honest and avoid being biased in your research. Even in your daily lives, class always show fairness and honesty. Confidentiality of the information of your respondents is a must. Take note that we have Data Privacy Act of 2012 that what? That protect the identity of protects the identity of the of every individual. Okay, for the quizzes, we will be having our quizzes, so it will be posted in our Google Classroom. Okay, so for your integration, given the research problem that you submitted to your research teacher, write your simple research methodology by group to be submitted via Google Classroom. Use the guided question below. So our guided question is here. We have the research problem, then who are your target respondent of sources or sources of data? How are you going to obtain that data? What sampling method would be best for your study? Or why would you select that method? And what do you think would be the greatest contribution or description of a best sample? And reminders class about the submission, always submit on time to achieve higher scores. Link will be sent to the Google Classroom or FB page. Answer sheet first printed, use yellow paper only for uniformity. Answer label for printed, always write your name, section, week number, and activity title. Secure a copy of the module. With this, thank you so much and have a nice day.